Right, good evening. It's 6:30 and we can commence the Manydown Overview Committee tonight. Welcome to everyone. Just the housekeeping. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. And the fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through the reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. Right, item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. I've received apologies from Councillor Carruthers, and we all congratulate her on the birth of Sebastian. Are there any other substitutions or apologies? I think it's all the normal committee. Good, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest on any items on the agenda? Any urgent matters? Nobody's told me of any. Good. Minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of October 2022 contained in your papers. Are we agreed that I can sign these as accurate? Agreed? Thank you very much. I'll do that in a minute. So we can move on to straight away our main agenda item, which is to receive an update on where we are with the Manydown programme. And we'll talk about whether or not we need to go into private session at some time later. But let's first hear from Councillor Isett. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any new members on the committee tonight? No, I know. I have spotted you before, actually.
I think Councillor Howard Sorrell, you're not normally on it, are you?
My first time, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I was just going to welcome Councillor Howard Sorrell. And yeah, so and there was a members' briefing, I think, in January that took place. That's right, isn't it?
There's a briefing note that was issued. That's
yeah,
correct.
Briefing note. Yeah. Okay. So this is the report is an update on where things are on Manydown, and as those existing members will know, we look at the two ownerships, the Manydown North, where we are in partnership with Urban and Civic, and Manydown South, where we are. It remains at the moment joint ownership by the two councils. So it's the two councils and Urban and Civic on Manydown North, and the two councils on Manydown South. On Manydown North, we are at and have been for some time now the key stage of agreeing the mechanism and the price to draw down land from the freeholder, which is the Manydown company. And you know, I have to own up that that is taking longer than we would wish. It is, however, something that has to be got right, because obviously you will appreciate that the price that's agreed for the land is absolutely critical. We're talking about land values that are in the many millions, and a gross development value for the Manydown North in excess of £1 billion. So the stakes are high in making sure that we get a price agreed with the Manydown company that still enables us with Urban and Civic to develop the 3,500 homes on Manydown North in a viable way, and make sure that they're good quality homes. So we are senior officers involved are speaking are in close contact with Urban and Civic because Urban and Civic have been leading the negotiations with the Manydown company, but we're obviously deeply involved in that whole process, and so I'm hoping that it will not be too long before we can reach an agreement. But if we can't reach an agreement with a Manydown company, then you know it isn't a case of being able to just say, okay, well we'll agree any price and get on with the development. If we can't, we can't, and so that has to be understood. Then in relation to in addition, on Manydown North, we've got the project director David Ainsworth and the programme director Barry Crabb from Urban and Civic here tonight, and they're going to give you an update on the programme, particularly in relation to the other key element for Manydown North in terms of where we are in terms of the progress, and that's connected with planning, so they'll talk to you about that. As the chair has said, if it's felt necessary to talk to you about the land drawdown, then that would need to be in private session. But if we're prepared to do that, obviously, if you wish to. Then on Manydown South, the work that officers are doing there is focused on making sure that we have the opportunity to proceed as quickly as possible with development on Manydown South in the context of a new local plan, and obviously that the work that's being done now is focused on preparation for Regulation 18, which would be I think later in this year, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So that's really is my introduction to the report, and I think what I would suggest, Chair, is that what we should do next is invite Urban and Civic to give us their report.
Thank you. Unless there are any specific questions for Councillor Isaac, we can perhaps hear from Urban and Civic, and they can field the questions as they come between them. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome, David and Barry. Nice to see you again. Thank you. We look forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for having us back at the mock. As Councillor Isaacs explained, we're here really in the capacity today as the development manager, so in the delivery aspect of this scheme, but less so around the commercials. And we're really here to provide a supplement to the report, which is before you, adding what I'd say some colour around some of the work which is going on at the moment around planning and some of the works which are occurring on site. I think to begin with, we'll probably start with progress with the site-wide frameworks. I don't know, Barry, if you'd like to cover that.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you. And as Councillor Isaac has set out, setting aside the commercial elements of this deal, the programme, the critical path for us is clearly centred around the planning. So you'll be aware that outline planning was granted back in December 2021, and since then we've been working on a suite of condition discharge of the site-wide frameworks, which were submitted in the middle of last year, and we regard those as a tier 1 condition discharge. So you discharge the site-wide frameworks, they reside over the whole site. You then move into the tier 2, which is a key phase frameworks, which is specific to the key phase going forward, and then tier 3 are the reserved matter applications, which inform what is being built, and you get the real detail. So the tier 1s have all been submitted, and I think since this committee last met, I'm pleased to confirm that 5 of those have been discharged successfully. The ecological mitigation and management strategy was discharged. That was a critical site-wide framework. What that enabled us to do is to start the process with a number of the technical stakeholders, consultees, including Natural England. And some of you will be aware that we're actually on site removing some of the hedgerows ahead of the sensitive bird nesting season and the like around the site access junctions. The ecological mitigation and management strategy was the gateway for us to put an application into Natural England to remove some of those hedgerows. We've worked successfully with Natural England to obtain that licence, and we're seeing the results of that on site at present. Another site-wide framework document that's been approved is the Countryside Park Development Brief. Again, another really big document, because a lot of what we will be presenting over the forthcoming years about delivery in the Countryside Park may not need full planning consent, past planting of hedges, and some of the softer measures that we're doing in terms of the environmental bits. So that was a really critical document and sets out quite a lot of the measures that we want to bring forward. And I think in due course, when we consult with the community and members alike, then there's a really lot of powerful and nice stuff going on in that Countryside Park to come forward. Other site-wide frameworks that have been discharged are the construction strategy, the travel plan, and the phasing and delivery strategy. We're currently working with the local planning authority to discharge the remaining documents, and I'm pleased to report that I would expect all of the site-wide frameworks to be approved within the next month. We've got a positive dialogue on all of the outstanding documents, including the urban design and vision statements. We've updated that to reflect comments from both the statutory stakeholder and the LPA, and that's currently with them for final review. The estate management plan has been updated, and we're working again to agree that. The drainage report is an interesting one. That the lead flood authority has been involved and consulted in detail on the drainage strategy. We've supplemented our infiltration testing, and that's been on site in the last month or so, targeting key ponds and key areas. So we've got more information in terms of the soakaway potential of the chalk, which has informed the drainage strategy, and the lead flood authority are now happy with that document. So we're moving to sign that off. And the heritage management plan has been supplemented following quite a lot of response and good dialogue with the county's archaeologist. So not only are we looking at built form heritage, but also archaeology to supplement the conditions. So I'm optimistic that in the next 4 weeks we will be through the tier 1 submissions, and work is now ongoing in the tier 2. And perhaps I'll pass across to David for an update on that.
Yeah, recognising that the main thrust of delivery at Manydown will be through this tiered consent. So, as Barry set out, the first gateway being completion of the outline and the tier 1 documents, the site-wide frameworks. The majority of delivery will be through this. There are other elements which can come forward outside of it. There are separate applications which we can cover this evening, which enabling works outside of the main key phase. But the main piece of work now that the site-wise have been submitted for the design team has been developing the key phase. So that suite of documents, which sort of technically termed tier 2, is really adding greater definition of the areas which you wish to start, the detail of what you wish to do in that area in a phase, slowly eating the detail as you go through, recognising the scale of the scheme. So the key phase documentation being produced at the moment sets a definition of what the first phase might be, which is up to 1,200 units, where it would be in terms of defining its location, starting both in the east and in the west. I think we've discussed before that desire to commence in 2 places using the approved access junctions to have house builders working in 2 areas to get the absorption commercially, so we move at speed and get the number of homes being delivered each year at the highest rate as possible. It also works through a lot of the technical details, so a lot of work at the moment with statutory partners to understand areas around this, areas saying drainage and further analysis. And there's also key documents in terms of establishing the quality of what's to come forward. So developing the regulatory framework in terms of areas and uses, and then having a design code which then codes to that regulation framework what is in those areas, how they work, how they sit together, how the harmony of what's developed comes together. So those documents are many. I think there's near 20 different requirements being produced in that key phase element. It will take us still some time. We're now fully underway with that suite, but we're hoping to have that complete mid-year and in. In addition to the main thrust of the key phase, to move that through, because after the key phase is in, the reserve matter detail, which is what many people would be used to, going from a full to an outline and skipping this intermediate step, that reserve matter detail can come forward. So from a DevCo partnership perspective, the elements key for ourselves would be the open spaces, the multifunctional green space, the roads, the drainage, developing the development platforms for house builders. So those are the packages which are also beginning to work the detail. And in many ways, we are having to look at reserve matter level of detail to inform the tier 2, because in many ways you need to go a little further to understand and test your solutions. So that's happening in tandem. Turning to other applications, so recognising that in addition to the key phase, of course, we want to start on site. We're able to start on site with the site access junctions which were approved in detail. We're also in the process of developing reserve matters associated to those junctions around levels and drainage. And we've also submitted new applications for construction access in 2 locations, one at the north of Roman Road and one at the Roman Way. And we can also utilise the permanent access along Worting Road as a third access for construction. And with those 3 access points, we can functionally separate the construction traffic from both existing and developed areas by using the primary road network. So that application was submitted earlier this year also. And I think on planning, that probably covers where we are at the moment. And I think Barry is also, just in terms of works on site, we're on site at the moment with vegetation clearance, and we've been on site early in the year with surveys work, and we'll continue to be on site with a myriad of survey requirements. That will pass back.
Thank you very much. Yes, you've been noticed on site. It's good to see. Yes, Councillor James.
Yeah, thank you. And I enjoyed your remark about you adding colour to what John Isaac said. I don't know what it says about John Isaac, but there we go. As always, I go back to the country park because whilst I appreciate, we love to say infrastructure first in this council. We've always wanted to say it. We're always desperately trying to achieve it. We normally don't quite make it, but we like to say it and believe in it. And I get you can't build a school until you've got houses with children in them, because there's no point having a school. But the country park's slightly different because, I mean, I remember when Kempshire, you remember Old Down, when it was a field with twigs in it. And then I lived the other side of Basingstoke. You go there sort of 10 years later, and now it's quite an amazing, relaxing kind of little hiding place you can go to and enjoy living in the countryside, even though actually you're right by the A30. And I think we have a similar, although larger, vision for the country park. But there's a risk that people will move in next to a field of twigs. I appreciate there's some trees there. There is no reason why we aren't planting trees there now, because we know exactly where it's going to be. Even if there's a major problem with the Manydown company and we decide we can't go ahead because we can't get the land at a viable value, we've still got 969 years left on our lease for that piece of land, so we can plant what we like there and use it for what we like. Where are we with that? Why isn't that progressing at the fastest possible rate? So it gets established, nature can return. We've lost some hedgerows. We want to replace those. And I still have concerns about most country parks sit with the county council. I'm still not clear what the management plan is, that once you guys have done your stuff, made it look wonderful and beautiful, that then someone's got to look after it. And I could see 2 councils fighting over that's not our responsibility. And the other thing, I was a little bit concerned, perhaps a bit of clarity on the Worting Road access, because the A339 is a beautiful piece of road. You can drive through Basingstoke, the middle of Basingstoke at 70 miles an hour, and it's lovely, and lorries can cope with it, etc. Worting Road is a slightly different animal. It's a little bridge, and then a funny little roundabout, lots of more houses around there than we used to have, and then the road to a lovely village called Oakley, which does not like traffic. They will nick the tyres off your vans if you're driving through there. They're just quite precious. I'm sure Diane will add more to that. But I'm just a bit worried about where that fits in and how we're going to control that as a sort of last resort. Kind of, that's where your plumber can go in his van, but we don't want big lorries going down Worting Road. So those a couple of starting points for you.
If I may, Barry, I'll pick up the Countryside Park. I'll leave you with construction routing, although I can confirm it doesn't go as far as Oakley. Well, I'll let you, Barry, let you explain the routing plan and how it works. So coming back to the Countryside Park, as I like to call it, dealing with the designation point and trying to explain that it's not a designated capital C, capital P country park in that sense. we couldn't agree more that this park actually is, or the principles of green spaces and their maturity is very important. I think what we have to recognise here is the massive endowment we have with this countryside park. It's 250 acres, of which almost half of it is already wooded. And that woodland isn't new planting in the whole, it's ancient woodland already. It's protecting it, managing it will be the key. And when it comes to new planting, and I can't claim any role in this, there's been Jubilee woodlands, there has been a lot of new planting there. It's part about creating a visual break from the area of outstanding natural beauty and the scheme itself. So there is a very established planted line between the two. So our vision in the countryside park development brief is less about adding to woodland, because in many ways, in terms of that sort of pastiche of uses, it's about developing the arable elements into short grasslands, into arable flower reserves, etc. So creating a balance so as an amenity in different uses and experiences when you're there, it serves all uses. So I take the point around early planting. Certainly in development, that is very much more of a focus, because we're not endowed in the same way on the arable areas. But in the park, it's a fantastic starting piece. I think for us, our main focus is getting in there as soon as we can to open it up in terms of connections, making sure that where we're hoping to be in 1A, in the east and in the west, to move away from those titles, and joining those together as an early move is quite important for us.
Yeah, I think it's correct to say that over the site as a whole of Manydown North, we've planted something like 18,000 trees and shrubs.
Thank you. So now picking up your second limb, Councillor James, in relation to the construction routing, you're right. I think you described the A339 as a beautiful bit of infrastructure, and it is a beautiful road, and it's an accessible road for construction traffic, and that is the route that the construction strategy and the construction routing identifies. Whether you're coming along the ring road, whether you're coming from the motorway, you would use that route to get to the surrounds of the Manydown site. Now, clearly the construction access strategy and the construction access junctions that we're seeking full consent for is one on Roman roads in the north and one on Roman Way to the middle of the site. Now, what we need to do, the idea of separating those, putting two of those construction access junctions in, is that we can separate the construction access from any residential movement on the site. And when we can connect the Roman Way junction through the site to serve the development in the west, then there'll be no need to track any construction vehicles down through Worthing, through the roundabout, through Worthing Village, and in the new site access junction. Clearly, that takes a bit of time. We've got to break Green Lane. There's bits on site that we need to manage. So in the short term, there is, and it's always been established, that we can use that the main site access on Worthing Road as a short-term measure to feed that key phase element. But as soon as assuming that the construction access junction applications are successful and the follow-on reserve matters for the haul roads on the site, we will be taking construction traffic off of Roman Way, Worthing Village, as soon as we can, to bring them in and serve the western side of Manydown.
Thank you. There's just one element that Gavin also mentioned, which was the ongoing management of the countryside park. Would you call it? Yeah.
I'll pick that up if I may. So again, as it's not a country park in the designated sense, this is actually another part of the Manydown development, which the partnership is to manage. So in first instance, and there we're talking about a time frame of over a decade, the original management of all assets, whether it be the countryside park or the open space on the development or the community buildings, is actually within the hands of the partnership. The aspiration around the management of the countryside park is that we probably will, well, we'll maintain flexibility throughout, recognising that we want to develop the park to be self-sufficient, minimal cost, and generating its own income. Our thinking is that this will therefore be developed separately to the rest of the scheme. So a separate management company for this element, or mechanism for this element, recognising its distinctness from the housing. Over time, I think once this is bedded in a decade's time, that the park is established, that our hub is working, our revenue opportunities are developed, and this is estate, as we like to think of it, is operational, we will look at longer term solutions. So i.e., in perpetuity, how will this support itself? In many ways, the operational elements, the income, the management structures will be there. It's about getting the governance right in the long term, because that governance role will be the key, because that's... Oh, sorry.
It sort of answers the point. And I get, if you're going to charge for parking and you've got one or two buildings in there, you can, there's conference centres, business meetings, etc. If you've got a good management company, it kind of makes its own, it covers its own cost. But then you have a storm, and it takes down an awful lot of trees, and they all fall down. Now, what I don't want to see, because I appreciate for the next 10 years, it's safe in your hands. I'm really hoping, and my electorate may have a different view, we'll find out in May, that I will still be around beyond 10 years. And people might hold me for account for sitting on this committee and not looking after the future of the countryside park. Who is ultimately responsible if there is a storm, the trees come down, the paths are blocked, takes away a cable or whatever, something needs to be done, there's a wild animal that's moved into the site and not an appropriate wild animal, and someone needs to sort it out. Who does that sit with? Because private land, you go to the landlord. Borough land, you go to the borough. County land, you go to the county. Countryside park. Because every piece of land is owned, isn't it, by somebody? Somebody's responsible for it somewhere. Who's responsible? And is it us?
In terms of responsibility, from henceforth, it's the partnership. So it is with the partnership until such time as a new management structure is decided. The process for that management structure in the future changing is actually a process under the agreements around the LPA approving such transfer. And in that moment in time, if it is a long-term land stewardship company which comes in and takes over the governance role, as I say, the operational funding, etc., will be there, then they would become responsible. But for the foreseeable future, it remains the partnership.
Okay. I just could perhaps add that it is, as David says, all about the governance and making sure we've got the right setup there, the right funding, the right sort of organisation. But thinking as a council, it's not management of that, direct management of the countryside park is not something that we look to be doing in the future. And I can also, I think I'm right in saying that as far as the county is concerned, they have no desire to be running the countryside park. In county terms, it's relatively small, and so it would not be something that they would, and I think they've confirmed as much, haven't they? That's not something that they would have aspirations or feel it's their responsibility to be running in the future.
Thank you, but we've been assured that there will be a mechanism in place. Councillor Tomlin first, then Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. David, it's a question, I think, really for you. From your debrief there, you were mentioning about, if you like, starting in two places to deliver 1,200 odd houses simultaneously or whatever. So working with our local, or the local planning authority, as you no doubt are, I sit on the EPH, Economic Planning and Housing Committee, and we've been reviewing the annual monitoring review papers and also it's now gone, but our draft local plan. And it's got a lot of projections for the Manydown site delivery way in the future of like 50 houses and virtually nothing much coming in, which seems slightly contrary to the words which I was very encouraged by, like starting as soon as you can in two places and 1,200 houses. So are you feeding them the information, or are they? What's the liaison that's going on? Are you talking?
Councillor Tom, we can assure you we're talking to the local planning authority. I think in particular on the point of projections of number of houses sold or absorption, as we'd say, that is something I think both our council officer colleagues deal with and ourselves. So the idea here is 1,200 units might be in a planning phase, so that's a level of detail brought forward. But the practical delivery will be parcel by parcel. When the more parcels we have delivering, the more the sales rate usually achieved. So in the first years, say you're starting 2 places with 2 parcels on each front, the absorption might be quite low because you might only have completed X units or sold in the year. So I think the projections recognise an early stepping in, really, 50 units, 150 units, etc., until we get to a run rate. So we've got a projection in there using experiences on other large sites and how long we think it will take. It isn't day one, okay, it's 300 units a year, but it does get to a steady state in due course, and I think those are the numbers which are reflected by colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. I notice in 4.3.4 that you talk about some of the land being taken back for farming. And it would be really helpful if you could just tell us over the next, say, couple of years, before you really get going on the building, how is the whole area going to be managed so that we don't have it covered in traveller sites or brambles or whatever else? How will you be maintaining it so that we all enjoy looking at it, even though we can't get onto it yet?
I'll pick up the first point, if I may, Chair. So I've highlighted in the report that we've had a conversation with Urban and Civic, and also we've had approaches from the Manydown company with regard to what the future use would be in potential farming of areas of land that are not going to be developed. At the moment, what we've undertaken to do is just for the next 6 months enter into an arrangement with Manydown company just to short-term farm the land, because whilst we can still get on and do work, there's vast areas that are lying fallow. So actually put it to some use at the moment whilst we're still in this process of a negotiation. It doesn't prevent us or Urban and Civic going on site doing works, so that is provisioned within the licence structure, so that at least we are producing, or the land is still producing, and it's being utilised at the moment. So that's the same. The sort of more medium, longer term, I think, is yet to be really defined. We've had conversations between the parties to just understand what could be possible, but as yet we've not made any or set out any principles to what we would do. But I think it's an important point that, yes, there will be large tracts of land that are being developed and utilised for construction access, for, I'm sure, compounds and various other elements of work that will be going on the main site, but there could be areas of land that are not utilised, and then we would look at appropriate uses with Urban and Civic.
Thank you. Councillor Lee first.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for, as Gavin said, the extra colour to Councillor Isaac's speech. I'm not going to focus too much on the planning applications themselves for the construction traffic. However, what has been picked up over the last few days for residents in Winklebury, particularly those living along Roman Road and the surrounding areas, with the work that's been going on to cut the trees down just opposite Winklebury Way, is the significant disruption that's already caused. So I've had several emails highlighting traffic backing up from Winklebury Way all the way to Arundel Gardens, which is about half a mile, and a 15-minute journey to get down there. Now, I know that was only sort of temporary works, but it does raise the question around when we do break in at that point, that there will be a requirement to control the traffic, and how can either we as a council, you as a development partner, mitigate that in the surrounding areas. Some examples of what was happening: we had rat running through Firs, which I've mentioned before, avoiding kind of the queue itself by going up one side of Kenilworth Road and coming out the other side, so that you kind of essentially hop the queue a little bit. But worst of all, we've also seen 3-point turns happening into oncoming traffic. So what I want to do is try and prevent something happening at that point when we do break into Winkelbury Way. I don't know if there is a way to solve it, you know, for the surrounding areas, but it'd be good if we can have some discussion around that.
I'll take that for me. Thank you, Councillor Lee. And yeah, it's unfortunately, as you know, with any development, there will be disruption. It's necessary evil. Unfortunately, it's how you manage that disruption. As you alluded to, yesterday was temporary works. I think traffic lights went up at 9:30 and they were down by 1:30. So it was a really condensed bit of work. The contractor got on with it efficiently. They weren't there for a minute longer than they needed to be. Looking forward, I would welcome kind of meetings with you and any of the representatives from Winkelbury to work through when we have a contractor on board. So when we appoint a contractor and we know their programme and intended sequence of works, to then sit down and have a working committee effectively and say, where are the pinch points? Where are the concerns? Where's the local knowledge that you know that they're going to wrap around from A to B? How can we help you help us prevent that? So I don't have all the answers today, and I think it's almost a kind of as I said, a working group with the contractor's experience. We will need to get Hampshire Highways involved because they will be arbiter of the traffic regulation order and the temporary works and traffic management consent. So there's lots of parties involved, but very welcome to engage with you and work with you on that.
Thank you. That's really good. Councillor Tomlin, you had another question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Andrew, really, it was the question, and obviously in the report about starting up or increasing. I was reading starting up farming or allowing it to go for agricultural use. Can I just make a request that a lot of effort is spent on the PR side of that, because once people start seeing farming on the Manydown fields, we are going to be inundated with things that we need to deal with, shall we say? And I can see it's going to make some email traffic, shall we say? And just one other question, just for clarification, in 4.3, you've got lease, farm business tenancy update. Could you just clarify for me that we are purchasing an option to a lease on the site? The site we are actually going to own the site? So what I'm just a little confused with the writing at that point. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll pick that up. Thank you, Councillor Isaac. So just in terms of the first point, yes, we are producing some messaging. I've already spoken with our comms team. So Sarah and I are just reviewing that messaging because I appreciate there will be some commentary, people thinking, well, what's happening? So we want to be clear that this is temporary, and actually, it's important to make use of land that isn't being used. So I think there's some positive messages in there, but as you say, we will get some questions being raised. And
glad to say I raised the same question.
Yeah. So we'll be preparing those and making sure that people are aware of what is going on. The second point, in terms of the way the option works, so yes, we have a 999-year lease which has an option contained in it. That option is to exercise when we exercise or acquiring the freehold interest. So, but that is only of the development site. The other areas of land that are not included in that still remain within the 999-year lease until we, as the councils, do something about that. So it's essentially, so we will still have that in place, but we will extract an element of that, and that will be a freehold interest.
So Manydown South remains.
Sorry. Yeah, so basically the properties that are sold on the Manydown site north will be freehold properties.
Correct, yes. So the intention is that sort of standard normal houses that are developed there will be sold on freehold here.
Thank you. Was it Councillor Lee? Did you ask? Yeah. And again.
Thank you. I just want to go back again to site entrance, opening up. David, we met a few weeks ago now with Councillor Compton Burnett. There was talk of going into the site using the existing farm entrance initially, because there's got to be a way of opening up the site without any site entrances happening. There's a footpath that currently runs through that area. Will there be any way to mitigate people's usage so that they can continue to access the path further on around that entrance itself?
I'll take that again. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lee. Of course, there's a number of public rights of way that cross the site, and there's a complicated bit of legislation, so I'm told, from our planning advisors, where we can divert and relocate those public rights of way in the short term to protect safety, and fundamentally. It's much more complicated if you want to stop them up and completely prevent. You can do for a short period of time, again, for safety reasons, but we would look to maintain, as far as possible, all of the public rights of way through the site. We will need to divert. There may be some temporary stopping up for days or weeks, but we will look to maintain access across the site as far as we can throughout the whole build.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or any more comments? Oh, Councillor Howard-Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. It's my first meeting, so forgive the ignorance. We entered into an agreement in February 1996. That was a year after I was born. I'm now a full councillor. I'm old. I have a pension and everything. What is taking so long? You said it's taking longer than expected. Was this expected? This length of time frame? When are we talking? When do we expect it to finish? Is it before you retire, or before I retire, before my kids retire? This whole thing is just baffling to me. So I would love to have some clarity.
So I will start the answer, but I'm going to look to Urban and Civic to give a view on when it might finish. But I'll try and give you some of the history. Yeah, I can understand your puzzlement about it. It was acquired in 1996, and for a long period after that, there was not a desire to build on the land, and there were a lot of people in Basingstoke who did not want to see development take place on the sort of southwestern side of the borough, and they campaigned very effectively to ensure that didn't happen. And then eventually the Manydown company, I think quite understandably, decided that they'd entered into an agreement with the council on the basis that the land would be built out. The administration had changed before Gavin tells me, jumps in and says anything about that. So that the politics had become involved in this, and so they decided that it was necessary to go to the High Court in order to get a determination on whether the land had to be properly developed, and they were successful in the High Court. And I think was it 2015? Was that?
14, yeah.
14, okay, but that sort of time. So that gives you some idea of how long a period of time the land was not being actively promoted for development. And so it's since then, since that High Court order, which said yes, councils, you have an obligation to build the land out and develop And there was obviously a period of time that was required in order to bring people, the opponents to development, around to the idea that this was going to be, that it was necessary, and it is necessary to build houses for a growing population, but also that it was going to be done well. And I think that we were successful in that. But I think that since then, there's the process of appointing a development partner and going through all the sort of EU procurement stuff in relation to that. And also the process of planning has absorbed a lot of time. So that sort of brings you up to the present, I'd like to think, and then I'm going to look to my right to give you some idea of where we might be heading in terms of the people who are going to build the houses. Yeah.
So to sort of take the. So to take the bet and given the time frames we're talking about there, I'd say that obviously now we're at a point where we're starting shortly in comparison to 1996. But we still have to recognise that this is a large urban extension with 3,500 homes, and it will take time to deliver the scheme. That they can't all be built at once. It's not economic, and people will not be there to buy them in the market. So our best estimate at the moment will be that the process, let's say, is up to 15 years from the moment we start in earnest, front-ended with a year or two, or 2 years at least, of infrastructure before you're looking at your first occupations of people moving into Manydown, and thereafter about 12 years, 13 years, depending on the absorption rates over time, with homes in delivery. Now, that recognises that will go through periods of economic ebbs and flows, which is what we're used to on most of our strategic sites, so that's built into the thinking.
So there's clearly reasons. Where are we at with the financial side of things? You said there's the financial negotiations going on at the moment. Do we have an estimation as to when that might come to a conclusion? Because it's, yeah.
Now, I think that would not be wise to be discussing this in public. No, I'm not even going to do that. Actually, thank you for the input. Oh no. This has got to be sorted quite soon. And I'm keen, and I'm sure that all parties involved in this want to reach a satisfactory conclusion. Why wouldn't they? The Manydown company wants to achieve its objectives, I'm sure, and obtain a suitable sum, and we're happy to pay a suitable sum alongside the county and our partners, but it's what that suitable sum is that is the key, and I certainly don't want to do anything here to compromise the negotiations that are going on at the moment. You can understand that.
No, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. The joy of having a fresh brain to ask the simple questions. No, it's good to be asked again. It really is.
Don't worry. It's the same comment I made. The fact that I was just starting secondary school at the time when it was bought, but I guess really to follow on and more for Councillor Howard Sorrell's benefit is how are we going to look to Manydown South, because that just covers the Manydown North element of it with urban and civic, to make sure that in 50, 60 odd years somebody's not having the same sort of conversation again.
Very good point, and it's something that we have spent time on and continue to spend time on. We've got to learn lessons from this, the positives and the negatives, but the objective must be that we do it in a way that makes sure that we build good communities, good homes, and we do it in a viable way. And I'm sure we can do that. I'm sure it'll be different.
Fingers crossed.
I think once the process has started in terms of the land drawdown, you kind of set a marker, and then negotiations become a little bit easier because you've got that marker down there. So I think it is always the first slice that's the hardest, because you overpay for the first slice, then you're stuck with a viability issue, which is obviously our biggest concern. So.
Yes, I think there's some truth in that, because clearly we're dealing with the same party on Manydown South.
But when it comes to the overall planning of Manydown South, it's quite different. It's quite complex because we've got 3 big bits of land all in that area. We've got the Oakdown Farm now, which is at the moment not allocated, SMV land, our land, the Manydown land, and we don't have to build on all of it. And I think just looking at, you know, people in the council, we need to know that. And we don't have to put houses on every bit of that land. And I think, you know, I mean, we won't have room for another country park, but there's got to be something there. Because otherwise the whole of southwest Basingstoke will be under concrete, and we don't want that, do we? I have to say, football stadium wasn't in my mind. Any other questions or comments? Anything else anybody wants to say? Councillor Tomlin.
Some that I think I would like to raise, but I think they are of a confidential nature. So whether we can have that session, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine if you've got some questions to ask that you're not sure about. Before we do that, any others while we've got our urban and civic friends here? No? Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone. I think probably it's just us. Thank you. Stop looking so delighted. Thank you so much for coming. Do appreciate it. Thank you. Oh. Thank you. So as the gentlemen leave, I will just ask the following motion to be passed. That pursuant to section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing it, and therefore that exempt information is likely to be disclosed as defined in paragraph 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Councillor James, do you want to second my motion? I should second it. Thank you very much. Motion is passed. We'll just give a bit of time now.